Hello everybody, the time has finally come. We're talking about Solutions Architect Associate today. It's been 10 months since I started this channel, and I started by talking about Solutions Architect Professional, and so many people have said to me, look, I don't want to know about this professional stuff until I've done the Associate. And I'm like, yes, I'll get to it, I'll make a video on it, put it off for so long. Finally decided to motivate myself to actually make this video by going, let's go outside, let's go to a nice park and film. So here I am, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can score 900 plus on Solutions Architect Associate. No questions about it. Pretty much, if you follow the advice in this video, I don't like making guarantees, but I'd say it's pretty guaranteed because this exam is, I'd say, like a beginner to intermediate exam. It pretty much covers a broad variety, but pretty shallow, of AWS services. And it's a really good exam to get into AWS. If you want a structured learning environment to learn everything you need to get started with the cloud, I'd say Solutions Architect Associate is a cert for you. Some people sort of have this view that you shouldn't use certs as a way to gain knowledge, you should use them to verify knowledge. And in a sense, I agree, but I think it's both, right? So you actually gain the knowledge by studying for the cert and using good, proper courses that aren't just cramming for the exam, which I'll obviously talk about in a minute. And then you verify your knowledge by taking the exam. If you do well on the exam, you've done as well on the exam as someone who's got heaps of experience in that thing, I think, honestly, you're good. You've learned that, and now you can go and apply that. So, Solutions Architect Associate, it's the exam to start with AWS, which is why I'm really excited to talk about today. Now, just before we get into it, there's a small disclaimer I'd like to make, and this is really the reason it's taken me so long to make this video, and that is that it has been over 2 years since I took this exam. So don't click away right now and go, oh, I want someone who did this a month ago, because I can tell you right now, I've done pretty much all the professional and specialty certifications, so I have a pretty good idea of what goes into the associate one, and I've obviously done it before. These courses and so on that I'm going to recommend are actually not the ones that I took, because I'm pretty much going to be giving the advice that I would give to my prior self if they were trying to get this cert now with the courses that are available now, because the quality of learning materials has improved drastically in the last 2 years. So you're all really lucky. You get to use really good learning materials and learn the content inside out before you go and take the cert. One other quick thing before we get in, some people have said to me, should I do Cloud Practitioner first or should I do Solutions Architect Associate? I'm going to make a full video about what cert you should do next at whatever stage. But before I do that, I just want to say there's 2 circumstances in which I think it's a good idea to do Cloud Practitioner and nothing else. Those 2 circumstances are, number 1, if you have absolutely no tech experience at all, and number 2, you have to have both of these prerequisites before it's a good idea to do Cloud Practitioner. If you have no tech experience at all and you feel like it's really hard to motivate yourself to study, and you can't really deal with something that might take a month or 2 to get the cert, Cloud Practitioner you can probably smash out in about a week. So if you kind of want a quick win there and have a bit of money to spare to go and do the certification and you just want to get your foot in the door, it's probably a good place to start. It helped me get my confidence up a bit at the very beginning. But for most people, especially if you've been a software engineer or a systems designer or anything like that, then just go straight to Solutions Architect Associate, no question about it. And if you have experience on another cloud platform, you could almost start with Professional, but Associate's probably a really good place to start as well. So this is like the place that you would generally start to learn AWS and get certified in AWS. So back when I did this cert, I used A Cloud Guru. They still exist. They've been bought by Pluralsight now. Heaps of random mergers and acquisitions with that company. I don't know what's going on with them. The course was all right. I got 909 out of 1,000 on the exam. And to be honest, I felt like I had knowledge gaps even at that time. I've since sort of patched those by doing the other certs and having really good courses for those certs. But I'd say don't really go with A Cloud Guru. It's probably not the best choice. There are definitely better courses out there. And so let's talk about what those courses are. So out of all the resources I'd recommend for this, number 1, if you've seen any other videos on my channel, I'm going to recommend this. Adrian Cantrill, hands down. If you go to learn.cantrill, cantrill.io, I'll link that in the description, you'll get to see all of his courses. He's got a fantastic one for Solutions Architect Associate. It is always the first point that I recommend to people when they ask what they should do to start. I've used his professional course. I've beta tested one of his specialty courses, and basically it's the best AWS content on the planet. So I would 100% recommend with that. It can be a little bit on the pricey side, but always consider this an investment. You're investing in your own learning, you're investing in yourself, and in the grand scheme of things, I think it's like $50 or something like that. It's really not that much. There is also another course that I'd say is pretty good. If Adrian Cantrill's a 10 out of 10, this course is maybe like an 8.5. and that's Stefan Marek on Udemy. His courses are always a bit cheaper, $20, something along those lines. And he's always very thorough. He knows his stuff quite well. Not as well as Adrian, but he's still really, really good instructor. I've used him for all the specialty courses, and those have been fine as well. So those are the two that I would strongly recommend. And then on top of that, you've also got Tutorials Dojo. So this is sort of like a practice exam site. As far as I'm aware, it's the only real practice exam site that I'd actually vouch for, because John Bonzo and the team at Tutorials Dojo are fantastic. They really know what they're talking about, and the questions are extremely well structured. They pretty much mimic an actual AWS exam, so I would go with those 4 practice questions. I do those at 2 stages. The first stage is when I'm learning the content. If I want to brush up on a specific topic, I can go and do the specific topic revisions, and then at the end, bring it all together by doing some of their actual full practice exams. It gives you an idea of what you might get on the actual AWS one. Sometimes they're even harder than the AWS exams, which I think is a good thing. Make it difficult when you practice, and then when you actually go and do the real thing, it'll be pretty easy. So the exam is a multiple choice exam. It's 65 questions, and you'll always have 5 answers that are possible. Sometimes you'll be choosing 1, sometimes you'll be choosing 2, sometimes you'll be choosing 3, and so on. They'll tell you how many you need to choose, and then you have 130 minutes to complete the exam. So you have exactly 2 minutes per question, which in my experience was more than enough time to complete the exam. I probably had at least 20 or 30 minutes left over at the end, and I know people who are a bit more experienced who've gone and done recertifications for them, so they've already done the exam, and then they go to do it again 3 years later so they can keep the certificate, and they've completed the exam in half an hour flat. So in terms of time pressure, I'd say it's not that much of a time pressure. There's a bit of thinking involved sometimes when you want to compare different architectures, which one's better, which one's worse, what's the downsides of this one, which one optimizes for costs, they might ask, which one optimizes for scalability. There's all of these different things that you might want to optimize for, but I'd say generally speaking, it's not that difficult to find the right answer. If you compare to something like Solutions Architect Professional, where often you'll have multiple answers that all seem almost perfectly correct, and then there's very subtle things that are wrong about them. It takes a lot more thinking and a lot more brain power. I was very exhausted after doing that exam. After doing the Solutions Architect Associate, it wasn't so exhausting. It was pretty much fine. I don't mean to say that the exam's easy. You will need to study for it. You can't just go in and sit it with no practice at all, but it is probably a bit less stressful than the professional or the specialty exams. Now, in terms of what's actually covered by the exam, that's where things get interesting, because this exam is, as they say, a mile wide and an inch deep. Compare that to, say, the SysOps Administrator Associate, which is considered to be, less wide but deeper. So you go sort of deeper into these logging services and these analysis services like CloudWatch and things like that. And a developer, you go into Lambda a bit deeper, and you go into like serverless deployments and things like that, and code build and all that fun stuff. So in terms of Solutions Architect Associate, it's a lot broader. You need to sort of have a good high-level understanding of pretty much everything AWS can do, but you don't really need to understand it in any major depth. I'd say a good litmus test for whether you're ready to sit the exam is if you can build a VPC from scratch and then play around with like putting EC2 instances in it or assigning elastic IPs, things like that, then you're good to go. That's probably the hardest thing that you would sort of need to understand when you do the Solutions Architect Associate, is like this networking idea, very basic networking within AWS. How does everything connect together? What are the route tables, do that kind of thing. If you can do that, then it doesn't necessarily mean you know everything else, but it means you probably studied everything else to a good enough extent. The other services that you sort of need to look at, you need to go fairly deep with S3, I'd say, in terms of understanding storage tiers and costs and things like that. And you also need to understand security. You need to understand databases. So you've got DynamoDB and RDS are the two main ones. There's also Redshift and a couple others. And just different compute services. EC2 and Lambda will be the main ones. Potentially something very sort of surface level on ECS, for example. And that's pretty much most of the things that you talk about. I think there's also some content on like on-premises storage, like storage gateway and file gateway and all these different things. So that's worth looking into as well. If this all sounds like gobbledygook to you, don't despair. You'll obviously learn this in the courses, and the courses that I've recommended are all extremely thorough. They'll cover everything that you need to know. So honestly, I don't want to be flippant about it, but I mean, that's pretty much it. If you follow everything I just said, so if you go and do Adrian Cantor's course, if you, for some reason, after doing like all 30 hours of Adrian Cantor's course, go, that's not enough, I want more, then you can go do Stefan Marek's course. And then there's also Tutorials Dojo, which is great for practice exams. You can do the official AWS practice exams, like $20. and then you're ready to go do the cert. In terms of like actually making sure this knowledge is really cemented, just make sure you do all of the labs that Adrian sort of suggests. There's heaps of different labs around. There's this big project where you set up a WordPress instance and then you auto scale it, and then you set the storage to be an EFS, and all of these different things, which is a really interesting project, and it teaches you a lot about what you need to know, especially around the compute services and databases and things like that. So following those labs is a really good idea. If you have any ideas for personal projects that you want to do, then go and do those. And if not, then there's a lot of different ideas floating around the internet, Reddit, GitHub, and so on. People have these ideas. I think this one is like Cloud Native Resume, which is a good like beginner project. It's very similar to the one Adrian does, so maybe do that first though. What I found was really useful when I was first learning this stuff was setting up a personal website, hosting it on S3 with the CloudFront in front, and then adding in some JavaScript functionality to make a request, and then you can add a Lambda backend, and then by that point you pretty much understand how to make serverless architectures at a very basic level. So that's a really good thing to do. And then another good project that you can do is sort of setting up like a database, setting up an application. If you already know how to program, that's fantastic. If not, use WordPress or Ghost or some like blogging platform, for example, and then see if you can set that up on an EC2 instance, get the database through RDS, and then like connect those up together on the cloud. So those are like pretty good beginner projects, I'd say. And if you can do those things, then you're pretty much ready for the cert. Now, a couple tips and strategies for the exam. I'd say the first major tip is really read what the question's asking. Think about what they're optimizing for. So if they want to optimize for cost, then you're probably going to go with the lowest cost option. So it's having a good understanding of how pricing in AWS works, which is unbelievably complicated actually. Having a good understanding of just the basics of like what's an EC2 instance going to cost versus what's a Lambda function going to cost versus what's DynamoDB versus RDS, all of these different things. Having a basic idea of what those cost roughly is really good. Another thing you might optimize for is scalability, in which case you probably want to use serverless architectures, but there could be some caveats there. And finally, something else that gets optimized for as well is sort of like this idea of capacity. So if someone wants to store like 10 terabytes of data versus someone wants to store 5 gigabytes of data, then you might choose a different service or a different sort of tier in that service in order to make sure that you're using the appropriate option. So there's different considerations to be made. Solutions architecture is all about trade-offs, so understanding those trade-offs is sort of a key to doing well on the exam. So with all that said, hopefully this video was helpful. I really wish you the best to doing all this studying. It's not going to be easy, but it will be worth it. You'll learn a lot. You'll find it enjoyable, hopefully, as well. And see you on the other side when you get your cert. So thanks for watching, and good luck.